All right, I see participants joining us. Thank you so much. If you have come to the webinar on Michigan family engagement, you are in the right place. I feel like I need to say that in case anyone has boarded the wrong flight. We will start momentarily. We have an amazing group of speakers assembled for you today. As we give folks a few more minutes to join, I just wanted to invite everyone to type into the chat box, what are you seeing as the most pressing issue for parents during COVID? I know that so many of you joining us here today are really entrenched in family engagement in every aspect of your lives. So we'd love for you to share your insights with us as we wait for folks to join. Feel free to just pop that into the chat box. What are the most pressing issues you're seeing for parents right now during COVID? Again, thank you for joining us, and we will get things started in just a minute. We're giving folks a few more minutes to join. Virtual school for the kiddos. Yeah, oh, let me open up this. Let's see. Learning virtually as a major pressing issue. Virtual meeting fatigue. I feel like we can all relate to that. Unpredictability of things, remote scheduling. Absolutely. For those of you just joining, we'll be starting momentarily. We're just inviting anyone to type into the chat box, just reflecting upon the most pressing issues you see for parents during COVID. And if you want to open up your chat feature, you'll see the answers pouring in. We have so many insights. Health, safety for their family, social service needs, and learning virtual. Trying to make technology work in their homes when they don't even know how to make a computer work. Absolutely. And thank you all for joining us. We'll just give about 1 more minute and then we will jump in. You are joining us for a community chat on Michigan family engagement. We've got some incredible panelists here who are going to share their experiences with you today. And in the meantime, feel free to type into the chat box the most pressing issue you see for families right now during COVID. A lot of concerns related to online access and virtual learning. It seems to be a shared struggle for all. All right, I think we will jump in. We want to honor your time. And I just want to say before we begin that if you have questions that emerge along the way, please feel free to add them into the Q&A feature there. It looks like a little speech bubble off to the side. We will carve out time at the end to answer all of your questions. You have an amazing group of people here ready to answer and share their insights. Again, you have joined us for the Michigan Family Engagement Focused Conversation. We will dig into insights and actions from the field. We have a group of phenomenal experts here, all with a focus on family engagement. We are joined by Shanae Edmond-Verley, who's the Chief Executive Officer for Vibrant Futures, Jen Sova, Administrator for ECE for Kalamazoo RESA, and Angela Bruning, GSC Coordinator for AMA. And we could not be more thrilled to be in all of your presence. I'm Rebecca Honig. I'm the Director of Content and Curriculum at Ready for K. Ready for K, for those of you who don't know, is a family engagement curriculum delivered via text message. We reach families 3 times a week with information on child development and skills that are critical to learning and growing, and everyday ways to support those skills right at home. We do this with 3 text messages a week. We start our support at birth and we continue through 4th grade. We have a whole child curriculum aligned to Common Core standards and the standards of all 50 states. We have a trauma-informed program aligned with the Protective Factors Framework. That focuses on helping families to buffer the effects of trauma on young children. And we also have a personalized learning program that sends targeted messages based on children's unique developmental needs. And really, what we all have in common, everyone on this call today, is we are meeting families where they are at, supporting home learning, health, wellness, and sparking those moments, those points of connection that we know are so critical to children and families and to the health of our communities. So without further ado, let's jump in. I believe Shanae is going to start us off. I just have to brag about you a little before you start speaking. This will become clear to all of you. She is a force in family engagement. She is the Chief Executive Officer for Vibrant Futures, which was formerly Campfire West Michigan 4C. She really brings to the forefront in early childhood and care and education a focus on scalable, sustainable, research-driven solutions that leverage human potential and really achieve results. Her work and her writings have been featured on NPR, the Journal of Economics and Education Review, the Council of Michigan Foundations, PBS, Campaign for Grade Level Reading, Harvard University's Achievement Gap Initiative. She just has a wealth of experience, and I'm just so happy that you are with us right now and can't wait for people to hear from you. So I'll hand it over to you, Janae.
Thank you, Rebecca. Let's just say that I, like you, are an enthusiast around family and community engagement. And that's all you really need to know about me. And I'm honored today to be connecting with you, family and community engagement professionals. And I'm honored to continue to be in this work. Next slide. We're going to talk about the pondering a new family engagement in the era of COVID and beyond. And I think it makes sense. How many of you all are parents? If you would just type in the chat that I'm a parent, because it's in that container that I think that we can understand the work and leverage greater results the best. Parents are situated on a continuum of from being under-resourced to being sufficiently resourced, but we're all in this together. And these are my deep beliefs. I think we share them, is that parents care deeply about their children succeeding. They care more than us that may be serving them. And that's an important place to be sitting. Every parent has potential to contribute. And the body of work that we are talking about, particularly Ready for casework, really supports family success in profound ways. And then every child has the potential to learn and to grow and to achieve. Next slide. And so there's this incredible power that's in parents. The sociologists call it agency. And I love Dr. Ferguson's definition the best when he talks about agency. It is really the capacity and the propensity to take purposeful action. Parents are taking purposeful action every day. And it points us to then a clear vision for our work with families. And that is that parents can be change agents and should be and already are. That they want most from us to work on what it matters most. And if we can get them what matters most, then they will act upon that. And if we can do that earliest as possible, that is a clear vision for how we might want to be working with parents. And parents in the era of COVID, as we all know that, and we spoke of in the chat, is that has certainly exasperated what parents need to do and have to do. And next slide. And it certainly has tested the agency, that capacity and propensity to take purposeful actions. One of the things that I get to do is work with our Great Start Collaborative in Kent County. I am honored to be working with to chair a Nurturing Parent Power Work Group, which is a collaboration of systems leaders and parents and parent leaders. They're sitting at the table, generally 50 people, 40, 50 people show up in our meetings. And this is a survey that was done by our Great Start Collaborative Parent Coalition. And they did this in April and in December. And it uncovers some interesting things about the support of parents. Um, as you can see here, and first what we see is that the top issues that parents talked about in April of last year was that they needed more childcare and they needed more learning supports and they began to lose their jobs, and so they needed more financial support. But what we begin to see is what their voice amplified in December, and that was still about childcare, definitely now about food assistance, and we've all seen that in the news. But what folks like Tonda and Tiffany just talked about in the chat, and that was the access to technology. Next slide. This gives us a window, though, into what our work and what a possible frame could be for the work of family and community engagement. But we have this distracting tendency. And the distracting tendency is what I really want to talk about and how it may inform our frame. It's what we know for sure that actually may not be so. Next slide. So when we think about, when I've been thinking about this over many, many years, about the work of family and community engagement, it sits on a continuum. And obviously the work and the posture and the container is that we're cultivating the power of parents. Not always are our actions and activities looking like that. And this is where I think scalable digital platforms like Ready for K really give us a window into it. That, you know, at some level we design our work to involve parents with this deep desire to connect. But what we might also signal is that the control is ours. And we haven't necessarily released it to them. So we become the experts. On the next level is this idea of engagement. Certainly it's around partnership. And at the some level, it's also about shared leadership. What we do is we maybe get a few parent leaders, a few voices, and that's how we kind of work with folks. But many times what we push to families may not be fully self-actualizing, that we're not necessarily getting them all that they need so that they can be free to do the work themselves. And then at the empowerment stage, this is where the true opportunity is. And I think platforms like Ready for K sit. It gives parents independence and advocacy and really freedom to work with in multiple ways. And one way is that the platforms are flexible. And so what we're hearing from parents in the COVID era is that, you know, we're being forced to these school schedules. We've got all of our children at home. I was on a call last week and folks were saying, I've got 4 kids. We don't have enough bandwidth. They are on different schedules. And I'm trying to now manage that for a 4-year-old, a 6-year-old, an 8-year-old, an 11-year-old, for which the institutions have not coordinating this. what we see in scalable digital platforms like Ready for K is that that takes it off the equation. Parents get to uptake what they need from it through a simple text, and when it's most convenient for them, and most importantly, when they can integrate it into their daily routines, when they're doing the laundry, when they're washing dishes, when they're going to the store. And so it puts them squarely in charge of their and self-determined in their support of their child. And by the way, if we end up looking at where we are around child outcomes, and we profess to want to push on child outcomes, these are going to be the strongest. This level of empowering parents is going to be the strongest lever of change. Next slide. So, and the reason why it's strong is that what we push to parents is actionable. What Ready for K is pushing to parents is actionable. It takes low effort, but it has incredible results. It's scalable. So in the lower rungs of involvement, we typically will hear ourselves saying something like, well, not many parents showed up, only a few showed up. Those are signals that that there are higher leverage strategies and ways to do the work. We know we want to get to all the parents. We want to get to those who are most vulnerable, lowest opportunity, and most under-resourced. And these kinds of empowerment strategies that help families exercise their agency is going to be the most powerful. They have the agency, the capacity and propensity to take purposeful action. So when we start to think about this, we need to think about it in terms of our strategies and our activities. Is it a push strategy or a pull strategy? In pull strategies, it's heavy lifting on our part, and generally we don't get as many folks as we'd hoped. We just don't reach them. And when you think about a push strategy, what we're going to do is we're going to push what they need, and they're going to be able to take it when it's convenient for them in a flexible scheduling. And and there are lots of these. Scalable digital platforms are probably the most efficient and lowest cost. I mean, certainly home visits are a push strategy. Certainly parent cafes, if you bring them to where parents are a push strategy. But the most powerful that we're seeing in the research is going to be digital prompts, scalable digital platforms like Ready for K. Next slide. And the reason why is because it nudges behavior. It prompts them to take action, and they get to choose. So it's parent choice of when they do that. Platforms like Seesaw and some of these other ones that we're using in early childhood almost forced parents into our schedule, and they're already trying to work. And if you're a parent, maybe you felt that way. Certainly parents are speaking that it's tough. What Ready for K does is provide a curriculum. And I have to keep saying this. I know Rebecca said this, but it's really important that we understand that this is not just some kind of random text or some messaging. This is a scope and a sequence around whole child development that gets results. It is a scope and sequence around protective factors that help both the parent and the child. That is a powerful set of curricula. And then it points them to resources. What we've done in Kent is we surveyed what resources do you use most often? And we are now going to be pushing those 10 top resources to families. We're not going to pull them to them like a flyer does. We're going to push it right to their hands. And they can, when they need it, they'll grab it and they will act on it. The container is this, you all, and I think this is really important. We have to sit in family and community engagement in a container that we believe in the agency of families, that they both have potential and that they will actually exercise that agency toward purposeful action. The messaging allows us to get random messages to them, and then the surveying allows us to amplify their voice and understand what they need. This is exciting. The next slide. And what we've done in King County is put that in and normalized it. And I suggest that you normalize it in a community if you can, not just in an agency or an organization or a district, that this is the Kent County way. And the Kent County way includes a number of emphasis and an engagement of community resources, but also includes actionable digital prompts. In this case, Ready for K. That's all I have. Back to you, Rebecca.
Thank you so much. And when you talk about agency, my favorite piece of this work that we do at Ready for K is, we do surveys 4 times a year, and we ask, like, what was your favorite Ready for K activity? And we try to get a sense of what's been working well, where we might have room for growth. And my favorite comment that we get back from families, and it comes quite frequently, is, well, I'm noticing learning moments you didn't even mention now. And that's what we want, right? We want to spark those aha moments in parents. First, we offer them up, but then once that ball gets rolling, once parents embrace their agency and see that there are these opportunities during their everyday routines, doesn't take a lot of work, they start going, oh, well, now here's this other thing and this other thing and this other thing. And that is, such a testament to just the readiness of parents to be that force in their children's lives, and the way that parents can just step into agency and their capacity and all of its glory. So thank you so much. Well, I could talk about this all day, but we're going to move on to another amazing force in engagement. I have to say, I've had the privilege of working with Jen Sova, our next speaker on creating custom content for her community. Jen is the administrator of early intervention and special services for Kalamazoo RESA. They provide educational programming and services to Kalamazoo County for children from birth through age 26. So if you've got developmental questions, she's the one to go to. She works to serve children and families through a mixed service delivery model, providing tiered support and technical assistance in early childhood programming. And prior to that, she served as a speech and language pathologist and program coordinator for Grand Rapids Public Schools. And we are just so thrilled to have you. So take it away, Jen.
Thank you. Who can follow that? Next slide, Mary. I am Jen Sova, like Rebecca mentioned. Our role is really a big scope of early childhood programs, birth through the kindergarten realm. So I pride myself in kind of the first phase of education for our little ones in Kalamazoo County. We provide many early intervention or preventative services, as well as special education services. And what I'll be discussing today is a little bit different than the previously mentioned parenting component, but we'll be looking at it from a school-based frame. Next slide. So early in the pandemic, we had to really rethink what early childhood supports and services would look like. And I have the pleasure of overseeing services for the Kalamazoo County. And so we made up this graphic to really look at the priorities and help us depict what those priorities should look like in working with families. So we began thinking about serving families from a very basic perspective. If you think about that Maslow's hierarchy, where health and safety are really prioritized over those discrete skill building. So looking at it very differently for my teachers than they had before, not necessarily jumping right on to worrying about skill development, but how to make those things easy, convenient, and really tolerable, shall we say, while everyone was learning and working from home. So this just gave us a really good lens into how we wanted to both recognize and embrace that loss of normalcy, really. Next slide. So we talked about that whole child, whole family perspective is really the vision and mission of what our work wanted to focus on. And so our agency really promoted services from that kind of like I said, basic or tiered service perspective. We worked with, we started partnering with a food pantry because we knew that we wanted to help families that maybe weren't connected with local school districts to be able to access food resources. We worked with our Michigan State Troopers and collaborated on a very creative way to ship diapers here because we know that diapers are extremely expensive and had become almost a luxury in some households that we were working with. So we wanted to get that piece as well. And then working with other departments, Rebecca mentioned we are a birth to 26 RESA. And so we have young adults that are right within our building who partner with our early childhood folks to make things happen. So helping us box up the food resources and take data and collect all of the necessary information for our food pantries. That was really a beautiful collaboration and partnership with our families. So getting those very basic needs established and met, and then partnering with our Dean Transportation folks when the students were obviously not coming to school anymore, because they had relationships with our families and already had their addresses on routes. And so they could safely and effectively take basic resources out to families to ensure that we had those lasting connections as we got up and running with learning. Next slide. So it's important that I note that we really want to see our families as individuals. And so one of the things that we talk about a lot as a department is making sure that we have multiple modes of communication that we're using to best determine parent preference. So whether that be one of our apps or whether that be physical materials that are getting driven out by our bus drivers, we need to make sure that we're honoring and listening to the preferences of our families. I think the other piece of this that's really important is understanding the educational priorities that our families have and how we can best meet them where they are with sort of what rises to the top with them. We want to build trust and continue to have those culturally responsive practices in place. We also work to translate many of our materials and hired a few interpreters during the closure as just an additional way to make sure that we could reach out and support our families the best we could and honor them for the different languages and needs that they had differently than all of our other students. Next slide. So I want to think about our supports in terms of a tiered approach to family engagement, and we have really adopted that and continued now that we are back in the school building. So we considered foundational for all of our birth to 5 families have access to support group options that are meeting virtually right now, both for children that have specific developmental needs as well as other group opportunities through our Great Start Collaborative. We also give all families access to Ready for K. And as Rebecca mentioned, we have taken on some creative programming with that. We have our infants and toddlers receiving one curriculum module. And then we have worked with some of my stakeholders to develop a very individualized messaging system for those families who have children with specific learning needs. We wanted to make sure that we were being responsive respectful of those learning differences, and realized that their rate of development was a little bit different than maybe some of their peers. And so wanted to really give them materials and messaging that spoke to their particular needs while weaving in some of those attachment pieces and protective factors that I'll talk about in a minute. In the second tier of support, we established some virtual office hours with some of our social workers and other specialists and provided coaching support. So as just another layer for families to have a little bit more intensive resources to really make sure that we're looking at infant mental health as well as the social emotional health of our families. And then really that top tier is the intensive support, where even though we're back in the building, we are continuing with our community partnerships. We're making sure that families have the referrals to outreach that they need, and are continuing to provide food and diaper resources as a continued support to wrap around our families. Next slide. I wanted to provide a couple examples of what our virtual and remote learning resources look like that are a good sort of a tangent to what Ready for K can provide. So really pairing language and video to increase our engagement and the ease of activities. So I'm not going to click on all of our links here, but in this example of a home-based support we provide for families, we might take a very familiar song that a lot of our kids might know and pairing that with that highly preferred video with vocabulary to promote those learning opportunities within very simple, very easy, very short opportunities within the day. And so keeping those multi-modality activities for kids with complex needs is important. So they're getting those motor and language activities at the same time. Next slide. We have established and utilized a strong Facebook presence. So we have a private group for families that is welcoming to all families of our 5 departments to look at what activities are being offered in this virtual world. There's some library links as well as recorded story times from familiar providers that we put up there for our families to enjoy. Resources also for structured play and learning opportunities for families in this difficult time. We also use Class Dojo and those Remind apps within the classroom. We have found that families are really quick to want to have that immediate feedback through a texting mode. And so we utilize those to send videos and messages to individual families, as well as school-wide messages for accurate and efficient ways to communicate very important messages for our school community. Like I mentioned, we also use Ready for K for all of our families and have that accessible as well. And then we have also launched Talking is Teaching in this service area to really hone in on very pre-literacy and basic reading strategies for our little ones. Next slide. I would be remiss if I didn't mention our protective factors. We have a beautiful artist who's local who does the artwork for us on our protective factors work. But, you know, designing messaging for special education in the early childhood population has to involve that parent empowerment. We have to have families believe in the successes that their children can have despite some of the challenges, and really helping them be the best advocate for their little ones. And so when we onboard new staff, we always train them on our protective factors, and we're encouraging all of our providers to use that frame when they're communicating with families in a very strengths-based approach. Next slide. In addition to being a part of the classroom community, we invite families to be a part of some of the resources that we leverage through our Great Start Collaborative, our Parents as Teachers, and our Early On programs, promoting, parent time for just parents to get away and talk to one another about the stressors of the pandemic and child rearing in this time. We have developed virtual play groups so that we hope to continue those nice connections between young families and their little toddlers and infants. And then also partner with our local libraries on virtual story time. So trying to be creative and using these opportunities to be innovative and preserving those connections with our Kalamazoo County families. Next slide. Another example of what our curriculum supports look like, we are utilizing a weekly interactive newsletter, and this is just a sample of what a communication strategy might look like. Our speech language pathologists are helping teachers come up with very meaningful communication strategies. Our motor therapists are offering motor resources and ideas to be implemented at home through those same learning opportunities. And so this is really meant to accompany our in-person instruction because we know that there are absences and illness and things that are really impacting attendance. And so we want to make sure that families have those continued learning opportunities at home. And so we've created a newsletter. Next slide. That looks like this. So every week our families get a funspiration that is themed. Like I said, it has daily activities, and it also has different areas of development are represented here so that we can ensure that families have very simple ways to continue to boost learning. Again, it's just another strategy that we're using for families to take advantage of if they're interested, and helps really that carryover of some of the songs and stories that we're doing at home. And families really seem to enjoy these electronic pieces, and we've learned a lot about our formatting through this crazy time. Next slide. Finally, I just wanted to highlight a few staff kind of beliefs and components that we've heard. Staff are just feeling better connected to families and caregivers than ever during this time. Having that very intimate relationship where we have been online with families in their home is very different than some of our school teachers have ever had the experience of. So that has been really amazing. Using secure messaging apps have allowed those critical communications in real time while preserving the teacher's privacy. Teachers just really aren't at their desk phones anymore. And so to be able to take snapshots of things happening in the classroom, as well as notifying parents of really critical activities as they're happening, has been a really great way to build trust with our families. And then finally, partnering with families to build learning content. That is something that we didn't necessarily do on a regular basis prior to the pandemic. And so asking families feedback about what they need supports in and how can we help their kids learn at home? What do they need? Asking that critical question has been very, very insightful to our teaching teams during this time. So I look forward to following up and answering any questions that you have in the next part of this session. Back to you, Rebecca.
Jen, thank you so much. I wanted to just share an observation I had when we were creating our custom content together. We have a series of listening sessions. Jen mentioned she brought her stakeholders to the table. You talked about in your presentation, your priorities on building trust and partnership with families, and on making sure that you were being culturally responsive, that you really knew the lives of the families you were serving. And this was so evident in our work together. Your stakeholders were able to offer a window into families' lives in a way like I've never seen before. Like everyday routines. I mean, oftentimes we focus on learning, but your team was surfacing like, oh, they need help with toileting, and brushing teeth is a struggle. And they knew these families' moments and where those supports were necessary. And it extended so far beyond what we tend to think of when we think of like academic skills. This was like the true wraparound vision of what it takes to help a family thrive. So I'd be very curious to hear when we do our Q&A a little bit more about some of your methods of really getting a window into families' unique lives and experiences, because it's something I know we all prioritize in our work with families. So more to come on that, I hope. Thank you so much. I just muted myself. It was just my finger slipped. I want to welcome Angie Bruning. This is like our second webinar together in the past 2 weeks, and you are a bringer together of communities. That is one thing I can definitely say is a strength of yours, and we're so happy to have you here. Angie began her work in the field as a family life educator and worked for 10 years, mostly as an at-risk runaway homeless youth caseworker for a community action agency. She worked for 2 years in poverty reduction, then intensive in-home family specialist for protective services. And several years she's also spent in kindergarten and preschool classrooms. In her current role, she is the Great Start Collaborative Coordinator, and we're just so happy to have you here and to learn from you in this next section of our webinar. So take it away, Angie, and thank you again.
Thank you so much, Rebecca. And it's always hard to go last after two wonderful speakers. At the same time, though, I feel like there are common threads woven through all of our work. So that's always great to kind of segue off of those other moments and just pull the whole webinar together that way. So yes, I'm Angie Bruning, coordinator for the Alpena, Montmorency, and Alcona Great Start Collaborative. Next slide, please. So for those of you that might not be familiar with Great Start Collaboratives, and let me not forget their partnering kind of body, which are the Great Start parent coalitions, so equally important to the work of the collaborative, which is more the educational and service sector side. But there's one of me essentially covering every county in our state of Michigan. And if you are on this webinar today and not connected, I would just encourage you to reach out to your educational service district or ISD or whatever it is named in your region, and attend a meeting and check it out. It's all about this early childhood systems work that we're really all talking about. So while I think it was mentioned in the first section, you know, there really is no silver bullet. It is about working together and meeting families where they are. So we have 4 statewide overarching outcomes. I believe these were set back in 2011 by Governor Snyder. We want kids to be born healthy, right? We want them thriving, to be developmentally on track from birth to 3rd grade, of course, beyond that as well. But the birth to, I'd like to say up to 12 is kind of our, the core of our focus. With age of kiddos and families that are supporting them. Thirdly, we want them to be school ready. I also like to say that is also schools being ready for kids and families, right? It's twofold. Lastly, we have a focus on reading proficiency and really those earliest years, right? Those critical early development, birth to 3, birth to 5, where we see most connections forming and those foundations for early learning. So that's kind of the overarching focus of our work. Next slide, please. So the projects I'm going to talk about today really are kind of those small wins. We have some overarching local goals, and really it's all about what we've all been talking about today. So coordination and alignment, meeting families where they are and being responsive to their needs. And then also for us especially, and it sounds like everyone today, just being able to make those connections for family of what they're already doing, that they can just be focusing more on, or making it more understandable for families. We, however, also will try to provide materials when we can, especially if we're hearing that's a support that families appreciate. So Baby Connect is one of our activities that's been ongoing. Oh my goodness, at least 4 years, I want to say. It is really heavily seated with our birth to 5 mixed delivery, home visitation partners. So with maternal infant health programs, Healthy Families America home visitation, early Head Start, and we were also doing some work with our childbirth education programming and providing new moms or at risk. I don't really like to use that terminology, but we used it with this programming knowing that it would give partners some flexibility in deciding who could use the support of the Baby Connect bag. So if you look at the photo on the screen, I laughed in coming up with these slides and saying it's not very professional. However, there was some value seen in that, hey, that's an office space and this is how we do our work, right? So there's the diaper bag, some concrete support in times of need items to kind of align with the protective factors. We've got some baby shampoo, thermometer, diaper cream, some other little items there, some messaging about, washing your hands that can go on the, oh goodness, the baby carrier, a baby book. And with all of our work, we get feedback ongoing on what goes into these bags, whether it's with our home visitation partners. We have a survey that every family that receives a Baby Connect bag gets to say, hey, what was most helpful? How could we change this? What would you like to see or would have appreciated receiving? There's a sleep sack in there. And then that big white folder that you see in the bag is full of community resources. While we do believe in supports such as 211 that are digital and accessible, we do like to localize resources, and so that's what's in the folder. We're also making sure that we have in there our Text In Ready for K flyer, although we did work with our Baby Connect partners on trying to upload them all at once to kind of break down those barriers for families. So we do love that option with Ready for K. So really, a couple of anecdotals besides all of the details there is that, for instance, our maternal infant health staff have said they really feel like providing families with these resources kind of helps to build rapport right off the bat with families. We've also heard during COVID, because we've continued to distribute, of course, in alignment with different programs and what's safe and healthy and allowable for them. But we did hear from one nurse recently, or social worker, excuse me, that said it's been helping to just kind of get some new moms in the door for an appointment, to have that kind of that bag and those support materials. So even though it's just about more than materials, it's about kind of those warm handoff referrals and just that ongoing feedback of how we can make it even more supportive with families. Next slide, please. Secondly, here we have our Jumpstart to Preschool and Kindergarten programming, which also is very highly aligned with Ready for K. In fact, our early childhood specialist at our school district, she watched a Ready for K webinar not that long ago and was kind of just saying out loud, gosh, we've got to change things up a little bit here. So it's always great to kind of have programs and be able to bounce content off one another. But this is really the heart and soul of this, is about getting some materials and ideas into the hands of families. While these were in-person workshops prior to the stay-home order in the spring, we flipped them very quickly to be able to continue and offer this support service to families, and we made them virtual. So while our numbers were down last spring, we are continuing with our virtual programming. We work at our ESD, just a couple of staff to distribute backpacks. We've distributed them alongside food pantry distributions, just to, again, be not creating an extra appointment that a family has to go to pick up a bag. All of those helpful pieces. Just a little bit of stats on our Jumpstart programming. So in FY19, 133 families received a backpack. And of course, we're responsive and want to know what parents think. So 93 to 100% of parents surveyed felt more prepared to support school readiness. And this has been developed in collaboration with childcare providers, Great Start Readiness Preschool, admin, ELA and math consultants, and it was originally based off of Macomb County Great Start Collaborative Transitions to Kindergarten program. And of course, we have that alignment with State Board of Ed standards of quality. Next slide, please. And this is just an example of what that flyer looks like, which the beauty of Ready for K is being able to send custom messaging. So any families that we have enrolled that we might miss, or it might be helpful for them to just get that second blast of, hey, what's out there and available. Of course, everything that we do is free through our state funding to families and providers from birth to 12. So that's just a little snapshot of what that flyer looks like. Next slide, please. And the next slide. I think it was Jen mentioned Talking is Teaching. We have also kicked off a community campaign. Michigan became the first Talking is Teaching state. It might have been a year already. Time has really flown by. So again, this is just all about like alignment across what we're all trying to do in helping families to see that they really are in that agent role or agency as, you know, having so many skill sets already to support their child's learning, and there being so many moments just built in throughout their day naturally to support their child. They don't necessarily need those materials that we often provide. So Talking is Teaching is just all about that, birth to 5, putting messaging in the community, utilizing existing trusted messengers like a home visitor or a library or librarian, which is where this example of the partnership flyer lies. So we provided some workshops for parents and guardians in partnership with our library that was looking to offer partnered opportunities for families. And the whole workshop really just is about that messaging, a little bit of you know, videos on early learning and brain development, but then again, just that message that you are your child's first and best teacher. And we're just on this journey with you to share resources, such as on the right of this slide, you will see, and I have to give props to Wayne County GSC that allows us to share a lot of the materials that they've developed through Talking is Teaching. So like right here, this little card that we distribute to families, they get a tote full of Talking is Teaching materials. And this one just talks about things like, talk about hot and cold in the kitchen, sing and dance together, always make time to answer your child's questions, things families can do and are already doing. Next slide, please. And I think this is my last one. I have just a few minutes to wrap it up. So someone was talking about, you know, kind of that continuum of engagement with families. And I feel like this is where our collaborative and parent coalition has really been moving into heavily into that engagement bucket of the continuum with what we are calling our parent network nights. So part of our parent network nights, and I do want to say that these are made possible by federal preschool development grant dollars. And it's focused on families with children birth to 5, and really working with them and putting them in the driver's seat of who do you trust in your community for early learning and development information. Like, is it a physician? Is it your librarian? We're hearing lots of different things from families. And we're working with these parents to kind of build a network of parents and kind of to coordinate knowledge across the parent and professional realm. So one thing we're doing right now is simply working with families on what do you know that's out there for support for birth to 5 parents and guardians and children. And what we're finding is families might not know about all resources. For example, we were in a room with a group of 8 parents and nobody knew what early on was and what an important support that can be. So this has led to us working with parents on a lot of the language that's used. So much is in the professional world, and we're working with parents on creating outreach materials developed by families for families so that they can really understand what's out there and using wording that makes sense to them. So we're also, of course, using a parent cafe model in those meetings to also just allow parents that time to connect and talk about their protective factors without kind of having that expert being talked to about the protective factors. Lastly, I just want to mention that these connections with parents have led to some pretty amazing activities. Pre-COVID, we had one dad start up a Watchdogs National Fatherhood Initiative with us. We had 30 fathers and father figures, excuse me, signed up for a kickoff pizza night, but of course, that was like the second week in March, and it just didn't happen, but we're still trying to connect with fathers in that community. And I don't think I have a next slide to go to, but we can check. Nope, that was it.
Yes. Thank you so much. And I like the note you ended on, talking about bringing families together in conversation around community resources and surfacing those resources that are working, that families trust. I think about this all the time. In our trauma-informed program, we have a messaging stream where we link to communities' local resources. And I always ask, like, well, when a family reaches out to this resource, are they going to have a positive experience? Are they going to feel heard? It's so easy to turn families off from reaching out to the health and wellness resources in the community. So it is amazing that you're doing this work to surface what's working and allow families to share insights. And then I always wonder, well, then what's the next step of communicating that to the service providers, so they know, like, well, hey, if you said this when a family called, it would help them feel more comfortable. Or it's just such a fascinating thing to think about. And well, we could dive into this. I know we only have 5 minutes, so I'll stop, but that is, thank you so much. And just all of the wraparound support you're providing in the community, and all of you, the supports you are offering, and the wealth of knowledge you're bringing to those supports is just really incredible. I know we have only 5 minutes for question and answer, so I will stop talking. I just want to mention, we're all kind of circling around Ready for K as we spoke. If anyone on this webinar is interested in learning more, we have an equity grant right now that covers up to 100% of the first year of costs, based on the families you serve, and it applies to any of the Ready for K curriculum. So reach out to us if you want to chat more about and signing your community up, involving your families in the program. We would love to have you. And now I will turn it over to everybody who's joined us for this time. Just pop your questions into the Q&A box, and we will get started on a community conversation. I see something in there right now that says missing the social interactions. So this is key. And a lot of you talked about this at different points in your presentations. What are some ways you have found really effective in bringing families together right now during COVID, when we cannot come together face to face?
Go ahead, Angie. I think, as everyone stated, offering multiple types of opportunities for families, so that we're not asking them to fit into our box, but they have options. So I think offering lots of virtual options, parents are much more comfortable with that. Both options that include their children on the screen with them, but then also offering enough opportunities where parents can be just parents and not have their kiddos necessarily available on the screen has been really important. And then I think just the materials that we send and the things that we say just helpfully help parents just know that they are still in our thoughts. We want to be there for them, and asking them what would be beneficial for us, and how we can support them, and not just assuming that we know what they might need.
Along those ways, can folks talk a little bit about how they surface families' needs, perspectives, cultural values? Like, what are the formats you're using to get insight from families?
And Kent, what we're doing is working through, obviously, our Great Start Collaborative Parent Coalition. I have to say, if I hadn't already said that, they are totally awesome. And these are parents. And so they are leveraging all of their relationships to connect with parents. And even though they move even parent cafes to virtual, we're working with our Head Start. We all have sort of kind of moved to this virtual environment, which I think, really is temporary, but uh, um, parents are connecting in those platforms. I definitely think that the Ready for K platform, which may be different and more robust than some of these other platforms, with the messaging and also with the surveying, and with also the resource connections, kind of get, and then I think you could, couple this with virtual meetups where you're discussing mostly how their children are developing and growing. I mean, everybody likes to talk about their kids, right? And if you just give them a few minutes, parents want the social connection. They can right now do it on a virtual, and we find that we're doing our home visits even that way, and it's working.
And do you feel like there are sort of ahas that have emerged during COVID in regards to family engagement that you think are going to really stick around, some positives in family engagement that you feel will come out of this challenging time? And that'll be our last question, but we will continue to answer after the webinar. If folks can pop them into the Q&A chat, we can make sure we get answers to you.
I think the big aha that I would just lift up is that parents, that we can get to more families. I mean, typically when we get to families, we're getting to a few, and they might be the same families. There are folks that are not on our radars that we get a chance to get to. And in COVID, that's pressed on our innovation. And so we're all innovatively retooling, redirecting, reprogramming the ways that our approaches. Certainly in person is going to be great, but it's going to be a limit. And I just have to say that we have a big, we're in a pickle. I don't want us to miss this. We're in a pickle, and that pickle is that 50% of our children downstream can't read. And so that means 50% of the folks we need to get to in a deeper way. And it's all along, and we're seeing those gaps at 1 and 2 years old. So we're going to need these complementary tools to get to the floor, the foundation, while we customize with other kinds of activities.
I'll just add on to that real quick. Yeah. Just what it makes me think of is, I mean, our work was already shifting this way, but I think Jen alluded to this as well, is just, I feel that our programs, our cross-sector partners are working together more and more with this kind of model that we were headed towards anyways, meeting parents where they are that are already involved with programs, and then kind of just surveying those families, who, and asking them, who aren't we reaching, and how could we reach those, and kind of, again, just sharing that role in building our networks with families because they know what works for them in their communities. And honestly, just this, like, Ready for K, or having, it's technology too, though, right? It's reaching more parents is about, what they're connected to. And it's not just creating a flyer and asking them to show up anymore.
Well, I just want to thank you all so much. We are getting tons of comments in this comment section saying, I learned so much, so many things to think about, so many new ideas. This was great information. Thank you all. And I just want to echo that it's just been such a privilege and pleasure to learn from all of you. And we should all feel free to continue to pop questions into the chat box. We can answer them afterwards. And thank you everyone for your time. Take care.